Okay, yeah. So, okay, what you may start. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the delay in starting this. Very simple. I would say it's a conversation rather than a lecture. So basically, one concept that I like to talk about is the idea of why I feel that today's world we are very distracted with I think too much technology in a way, and for this reason I feel that the idea of craft and the idea of making things and the idea of slowing down is very important. So I think this Mingei thing captures our current anxiety currently, the current anxiety that's being felt everywhere, not just in terms of academia, but also in terms of like if you're looking at the commercial world out there, there's also a lot of anxiety in terms of what is it that we need to do to fix some of the issues that are being faced by our civilization. In the next slide here, what I'm showing is actually the concept of Mingei and the origins. The first thing is that it's a Japanese folk art. Actually, what it means is that in Japan, there's a lot of the things that people do are actually handmade. They don't rely on factories or mass production, and it also that you can almost relate every single object produced by the culture to a particular place. So that makes it quite unique because Bengay points out to a very particular culture or groups of people, and it's community driven, and it deals with your daily life. And I find that that to be a very interesting aspect of Mingei. Now you look at today's current situation, right? A lot of us are actually disconnected from our environment. Even like you make a phone call or you send a message. I think the idea that our civilization has introduced us to using a lot more technology has removed us from this concept of being more connected to our way of life. We can no longer feel the environment in which we are in. So I think a lot of that is because of the erosion caused by technology. So this is the introduction to the lecture. So after these few pages of very boring text, let's look at some more interesting imagery. Yeah? Okay, so the first thing here we talk about is the tradition of, if you guys remember, your fathers and your parents, right? They used to have like old bicycles, or they may have old second-hand cars. So the whole tradition of man and vocation speaks about the fact that you are not separate from what you do. And I used to tell some of you guys have heard me saying this before. The idea of the carver and his wood, there is a relationship. You see, the carver knows his wood. And that relationship somehow has disappeared from architecture. For example, when you use AutoCAD or Revit, right? You don't really have a connection to your drawing, or to the paper, or to the ink, or to it's lost. So on the right hand side, we talk about also a sense of see, Gratitude was written by Oliver Sacks. He was a very sick person before he died, I think. It talks about noticing things around you. This book is very excellent because it talks about simple things like, when you take a shower or a bath, or you go for a walk, right? When you start to feel the power of gravity, you get a sense of smell, a ray of light, like, that escapes your window, I think, behind your curtains, So Gratitude speaks about, Oliver Sacks is scientist, and he loves, he talks about being more aware, and goodbye things is also about being aware. Doesn't mean that you need to have a lot of attachments around you, So it's all about you and how you connect to the outside world. So if we talk about inside and outside, which is very interesting, right? In architecture, we always talk about inside and we talk about outside. So goodbye things about having a relative relationship with the things outside of you. And when you dispose of certain things, you become more aware of who you are. So these are the starting point of talking about Mingei. These are all the fundamental concepts of awareness. The slide number 10, actually on your left side, uh, it's a it's a very the cover of the book looks very interesting, and you feel like, oh, something nice to read. But once you get into it, it is not all that great, but it's just a very good introduction of being able to see things around you. So I recommend the book only in the sense that sometimes because you remember in civilization, right? Everything is supposed to make you go a lot faster. Technology is supposed to give you, apparently technology helps you to be more productive. Actually what it does is it removes the concept of waiting and looking around and noticing your environment. So the idea behind this book, Beauty of Everyday Thing, is for you to help you to notice again. For those of you who are constantly running and running and running and running, right, to go somewhere, you wouldn't be able to notice the things around you. And this book is interesting because only from the point of view of slowing down and noticing things around you. Why we talk about Immanuel Kant? Because he's one of those philosophers who will write like 500 pages on any subject. And the whole point about his book is that sometimes we need to understand why is it that we treasure certain things and we don't treasure certain things. So this is like, first of all, I think it's very interesting for anyone to try and attempt to describe what nature is, or whether nature is actually beautiful. Actually, I've spoken to Yusra about this. Do we think that everything in nature is beautiful, or there are things which are naturally ugly? So we don't know about that. So Immanuel Kant is trying to almost put into words what the meaning of beauty is. He's written a lot of other books like on ethics and morality. He's written a couple of things about pure reason. There's one book he wrote about pure reason. Read this, because then you begin to understand that our reality about what is beautiful and what's not beautiful is all dependent on our individuality. Actually, there's no subjective way in which you can, or rather, there's no objective way in which you can say this is beautiful and that is ugly. Now, the fundamentals of all this discussion is very interesting for you to really get into my final slide at the end, which summarizes this whole presentation. Right, I introduce all these concepts in order that you can then understand why I draw the final conclusion in the last slide. So Mingei is supposed to be simple, natural, it's sincere, and then when you read all these words, right? For those of you who have done your reading, you know that these words are very similar to John Ruskin's marvelous book called The Seven Lamps of Architecture. There are a lot of parallels in sincerity and honesty, being authentic and being natural. So these two books, I think, or these two concepts of Mingei. One is the concept of Mingei on the left side, and side number 13, it talked about Ruskin's Seven Lamps, right? I think the fact that you can draw these parallels, someone who is like completely English, and then you get a guy like talks about the Eastern philosophy, to see that these two hemispheres can actually come together is very interesting. It may be that somewhere underlying beauty, or somewhere underlying our craft and our art, or our human nature, is the fact that we are one. Basically, there's no difference. We're all connected. Yeah, so that is another concept of Mingei, that perhaps Mingei is looking at something that runs inside every one of us as a human being, instead of saying it's Japanese or it is English. So the next slide I'd like to show here is the theory of why we are rushing everywhere, and why we are facing all this panic, and we have anxiety, and we suffer from fear of losing, and we feel very attached to our possessions. And the reason these images just illustrate the fact that even to lead to this concept of Mingei, to understand it, is the idea of letting go. Because in Mingei, basically the philosophy is you leave things as they are. It's very close to another concept also by the Japanese. They call it wabi sabi. Wabi sabi is like saying like in Chinese people, right, they like to say never mind. Wabi sabi is like letting go means never mind. It's okay. So your expectation of what needs to be perfect and what needs to be ideal, right, may not be right. There's no right and wrong in terms of what is perfect and what is beautiful and what needs to be the ideal form of anything that you expect. So the expectation theory is to say that we should be driven not in terms of fear of losing something, but we just relax. Just look at anything, mistakes around you as just part of the ecosystem, as a process. Yeah, and on the right hand side, you have aspects of individuality, which is to say that if you are different, that's great. You don't have to be just another number, in the system. You can be different. Let's get to the next slide. We talk about craft, which is more related to our project one, okay, one B, 1C. So what is craft actually? It's in relation to making something. Craft is like you're making something out of nothing. So basically, that activity is called craft. And then what you see here is like I put up three very common examples of what you find in Malaysia. But on the far right is actually something that I found in France. I can't pronounce the word. It's called Fort, which is very near TVA in the middle of France, and you can see that there are certain characteristics to craft in the sense that you can see how none of these three things can ever be like printed. You can't really print them and like put it in a Xerox machine or photocopy and replicate. And I think it's because it's driven by a natural order called the spirit or the force of nature. It's something that's driven, and that's Mingei. It basically they're talking about an imprint in our head that forces us to make these things. You see the difference is you go to the left side again. If I were to just look at the left side again, what the text says here is when you craft something, you're making something, whereas the ones on the right, you're not really crafting. It is almost a need. It is almost like the lamp is supposed to help you illuminate a room, and then the plane is supposed to help you to make the wood smoother. And then the door handle is for you to open the door. So the craft element is no longer the point of the craft. Is not to make something, but it's to do something. So that's the big difference between like the craft is not just to make something for no reason. It is, you see that the things on the right has a purpose, and that's why Mingei talks a lot about purpose. So I just go to this slide very quickly, which talks about the difference between Mingei and craft is that Bengay is more folk, it's community driven, it is culturally driven, and it takes many generations to understand the whole knowledge base. Whereas, so it's a tradition, it's folk and it's tradition, and it's a way in which we do something. It's a collective form of art. It's very collective. It is not something that you do for yourself. It has a sense of giving and purpose. Okay, so Mingei is derived from that concept. So the next slide I'm showing you is actually Jesus. I think Jesus is among one of the most famous people that we all know. Basically, he started out as an apprenticeship. So I think to understand Mingei, you have to understand that tradition is part of the whole process. You cannot have knowledge without. First of all, earlier in the slide, do you remember I talked about the cover and his wood? But now it's not Jesus and his wood, it's Jesus and his daddy, his father. There's this thing called apprenticeship where there's a level in which you're not just talking to the wood, someone is telling you something. So this is a very beautiful arrangement where you have to understand between you and the crafter isn't everything. It's just not you and your wood. There is another person next to you who is talking to you and say, hey, you have to do it this way. So that apprenticeship element, I think, is also missing in our culture today. absolutely missing from today's culture. That's why you want all these face-to-face meetings, and I can understand that. You want face-to-face meetings. You want to be able to sit in someone's office, have a conversation, about his work, and that is crucial. So the system of guilds was set up many years ago in order to allow people to come into workshops and they exchange their ideas and they polish their skills. So, but I think this is something that is critical in today's education system and it's missing. Okay, so the thing about craft and Mingei and tradition is that it disappearing. Why has it disappeared? It's because the demand is not there, And why is the demand not there? Because people want things quickly, You see in this country, Myanmar, there are people, if you go to Myanmar, you move around, you will see drinking pots, along the road. And you wonder who puts them there, right? It's because they believe in the culture of giving. Basically, if you're tired and you're a traveler, and you move around, you scoop the water from this so-called bus, and it's traditional. And this custom is missing because people say it's dirty, COVID, it's COVID. Can't drink from this roadside water anymore, So our culture has taken us away from our customs. What culture are you talking about? The internet culture, okay? Dirty, wash your hands, too slow. Okay, so our customs are fading. And so what fades together with the custom are these pots, you see? These beautiful clay pots are also disappearing together with the custom. So on the right-hand side, closer to Malaysia, basically this lady is actually one of the last few families, I can't remember, was it Terengganu or somewhere, up north, yeah? Last few families that make this thing called the name of Labu Sayong, and this Labu Sayong basically is a vessel that keeps water and takes out all the toxins from water and keeps it as natural as possible. So all the inorganic materials are absorbed by the clay. And they go to about 2 meters tall, this Labu Sayong is a meter and a half. It's an incredible craft, and that is absolutely a Mingei element. Basically, it is done for a need, it has a purpose, and it's a communal kind of artifact. Other customs which are fading, I think, are chairs, the way you make chairs. But of course, the reason for that is because different cultures have different reality, and I just want to compare two different types of chairs in which our expectations for what is craft and what is not craft can be very, very varied. The one on the left side, the little sketch I did for a Burmese, I think it was like a Burmese delivery chair, and then on the right hand side is actually a very simple European Baroque chair. You can see that the aesthetics are completely different. So the tradition of making a chair for purpose is there, but the embellishment and the outlook can be very, very different. So today we're not talking about what a thing needs to look like, because our reality changes over different cultures. I bring back this amazing door handle again, which I found in Haute in France. And you can see, basically the point of this image is to tell you the intelligence, the level of intelligence that you get, when you look at this thing, right? Whatever he's thinking of, this guy, the ironsmith or the cobbler, you can call him the craftsman, right? When he did that, what drives him? You wonder, what drives him to do this? Okay, that whole purposefulness, the whole idea of like, is it comfortable? I think I have handled this sort of thing before. It actually fits the hand like a glove. You know what I mean? It fits your hand like a glove. It's amazing. So this is something that machines don't do. It goes with the flow. There's this whole relationship between you and what you hold. And that's called cultural intelligence. It's just a word that I use. It's called cultural intelligence. And further along, more feeding customs. What are the customs of like our very famous Malay sapu, the traditional Malayan broom? You compare it to the vacuum cleaner. Again, these are reality tunnels, but the simplification of tasks, when you simplify something, actually, I think the thing on the left side is far more beautiful, that minimal elegance. There's that very deep sense of purity about that design. And you couldn't make it simpler than that, right? Which is something very powerful about our broomstick, the broom. And then on the right side, I put some very remote people. I just try to bring together all these things that we talk about. We talk about usefulness, we talk about luxury. Of course, the broom picture just now, you can see like you can sweep the leaves in the garden in a luxurious manner or a less luxurious manner. But I think the one on the left is far more luxurious. The experience is, I think the experience is far more luxurious. So luxury is a matter of culture. So when you put the four people together, Palasma on one hand is an architect, Ruskin is a writer and a collector, and then you got Walden, who is a philosopher, a writer, and Yanagi, who wrote this book called Everyday Things. So basically, when you put all of these concepts together, what people telling you and what is out there in terms of morale, ethical values, and usefulness, and your sense of what seems to be luxury, right? You get a roadmap for Mingei. You get to understand where Mingei comes in, where you have to balance all these philosophies and theories and your understanding of moral values, ethical values. Then you get very close to understanding what actually Mingei is trying to propose here. Okay, that's why I will have. So the thing about Mingei, you don't. There is no delegation. Delegation is like when you go to a post office. What you get? You go to a post office. You say, "Excuse me, I lost my letter." Then the guy at the counter will turn around and say, "Hey, Ali, sorry, no offense to anyone." I say, "Hey, Ali, where's the letter?" And then Ali says, "Achang, where is it?" So that's called delegation. Everyone delegates and delegates and delegates and delegates. Nobody takes participation of the act. Okay. In Mingei, you dirty your hands. Okay. You dirty your hands. You step into the mud. Okay. That's the idea of Mingei, is that the act is not delegated. And all these workers, it's so beautiful to see all these guys. They're like dancing and they're singing a song and they're performing. They're performing live. Life is like a performance. Everything is just out there. You all have seen the Charlie Chaplin movies. In fact, everyone is just engaged. It's engagement, and I think Mingei speaks a lot about that. The carver and his wood have a relationship. So you don't delegate. You don't delegate. So what happens in our culture today? There's a lot of delegation, over delegation. Okay, then it also talks about. Sorry, I'm looking at a slide again here called non-delegation. It also talks about like this guy, who designed the brown turntable. He designs everything, every part, every nut and bolt is designed, and nothing is delegated to another guy and say, okay, you look after the screws. I just do the casing, or I do the front elevation. You do the plans. That kind of delegation doesn't happen in the brown turntable, the design, and a bit like also like the way we design point 92 on the side on the right hand side. It's kind of like we talk about like everything has to be done by us. We don't kind of say, okay, we do the marine plywood, but when it comes to the concrete, we let the contractor do it. So this kind of like craft process is that the idea of delegation doesn't occur. It's all about you and your art or your trade and whatever you do. I also want to talk about the next slide, which is about two philosophies, which is one is the Rudolf Snyder's concept of an endeavor to develop ideas for what makes us human, And he actually started a school called the Waldorf system, and it is all about like teaching kids how to bake cookies and pluck flowers in the morning before they go to school, and wash their own dishes. And that tradition, I think that culture is something that Rudolf Steiner talks about, is to become more human, even to help children to resurrect their identity. It's like the unawakened soul in people. And I don't think iPhone 11 does that for us. I don't think it awakens the soul. Maybe it does to some of you, but what Waldorf talks about is the idea that you can actually learn to be more aware by doing simple things like connecting yourself to your work. So I get on to the next slide. We talked about literature. You have to start reading up a lot of these things. They talk about the hand, why we need to think. That guy book this Kishori Mambu Bani's book is very important because it's one of the books that Ken Yang lent to me, and when after I read it, I kind of understand why our culture has got certain trappings. And then on the right hand side, obviously you may have read already The Craftsman and Ways of Seeing, two excellent books. And then further on, I like to talk about obstructions that are in the way of us getting into this so-called Mingei spirit. I will kind of like just show you this slide. I think you can make out what happens here because our technology now gets in the way of expression, and I think we need to reconcile how we think, about things. On the right hand side, actually, we're talking about the fact that sometimes we forget that whatever we produce and put into our environment, they in turn will affect us. So this is almost like a cycle thing, The point I want to make here is that when you think about craft, right, whatever you leave behind, they will eventually impact the next generation of people in that culture. So never forget that whatever you produce will be left behind for the other people to put into their life. So it's very important we understand that cycle. Next on is talk about Kinsugi, which is a very interesting philosophy about mistakes. I'll tell you about mistakes before. I think Kinsugi is about like understanding that everything doesn't need to be perfect. And I put the patchwork there. Basically, the patchwork is actually the demonstration of the fact that things which are in array and some kind of disarray and not in such a great order is actually beautiful, and that's what Kinsugi talks about. Next slide. I would like to go on to nature's geometry. There's a lot of things in nature which are beautiful, and nature's geometry is one of the reasons why Mingei got in very deeply into the Japanese culture, because they made nature a part of their lives. Nature's geometry can be seen, I think, also in our architectural designs, clockwork, artifacts, product design. Nature's geometry, I think, is something that Mingei also recognizes as part of the system of their folk art. I talked about chaos and in design and craft before, but where this come in is to say that actually in Mingei, order and chaos are relative. They go hand in hand. Within order, there is chaos, and inside chaos, there can be order. So they recognize that perfection and imperfection is a duality. It occurs, happens together. I just did a sketch on the right-hand side, which is hand tools. You can see that a lot of these tools are actually derived from the Mingei culture, in which the tools are supposed to be held by the hand. So that connection already helps you to understand that Mingei is actually the idea that you and the tool have a direct connection. And that's why the book by Palasma earlier that talks about, the fact that he titled the book Eyes of the Skin. Actually, the skin is the only dividing element between you and the world outside you. So all these tools actually reflect that inner awareness of who you are, and then the tools allow you to then shape the world out there. Inspired by nature, just a process to show that architecture has some references in nature. And then I talk about automatism, which is something that in the processes of Bengay, there are a lot of processes which are very automatic and very naturally occurring, and the very interesting sculpture on the right-hand side is actually by John Pangoli, who understands the nature of things, and he made this sculpture to move in a very unpredictable way, and the same way that Jackson Pollock paints And the beauty about both things are that it's apparent that when you leave things as they are, beauty comes out naturally. You know, this is the thing that I like to talk about in Mingei, that a lot of the things that evolve and the beauty, that the essence of Mingei is that because you leave things as they are and it comes out naturally. So this, I think, my last slide. I just want to leave with a quote. The references there are for you to look at, you know, but I think I like to conclude the whole point about this lecture, Bengay, is to come to this term that says that actually, if you look at civilization as a whole, there is no waste. There is no waste at all, you know, or mistakes in our culture, and that what we must do instead is to just embrace all the changes and all the flaws as part of an evolutionary process of seeking out what we call beauty. You know, I think I just want to finish my talk here, my mini talk here on that note. Okay, Yus, I think over to you, and Yusra.
I'm muting myself.
Okay.
I'm muting myself. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I recall that part when you said about the beauty, how do I say,
Which slide do you want to look at?
how do we define beauty, right? Inspired from nature and all that. But I mean, I think I suppose we did try. I mean, there are people who tried, like we have William Hogarth. I don't know whether you've come across with that. Like he tried to. His book is called William Hogarth, The Line of Beauty. So he was trying to define beauty through in a way science or mathematics, like, you know, if the line was in such proportion, you know. I think it's also the same with, you know, I think the Roman times where you know, architecture was I would say like mathematics. I mean, art in mathematics, like, you know, they're very concerned about the proportion, and it's all about the ratios. I mean, they try to kind of how do I say, rationalize what is beauty, you know. But I mean, but I don't think it's I don't know
pointless. I think it's pointless. Can I make a comment on that? I think it's coming from a different philosophical angle. I think it is pointless to try and define anything, actually, because the whole thing about when you look at the way that we read into philosophy is that let's say when you say a building is tall, before we get to beauty, let's say I say that building is tall. That's your tall, you know. Your tall is that it is above 100 meters. My tall is above 86 meters, and then someone's tall is when it is above 58.6 mm. You know, all these are definitions, words and numbers, and I call it abstractions. You know, if I say I have $50, you know, does that make me rich? It's relative, right? Because someone says, oh, I've got $200. Is he richer? So where you draw the line? So beauty is a little bit like that. It's just a word. You try to, you know, when you look at a flower, you try not to describe it. You see, when you try to describe it as beautiful, then you start putting dimension and say it's beautiful because the yellow is, you know, 0.6 mm red, 3% this, 10% that. Right? Then I think you lose it. I think as soon as you do that. So basically, we can't. You know, I think we cannot define what beauty is. That's why.
So that's what I'm saying. That's how they try to justify. Like, I'm just saying, like, you know, when they did the Vitruvian Man, for instance, like, you know, what makes the Vitruvian Man the perfect man? I mean, like, you know, it's different. A person in the West and Asia is you know, they're different. So I'm just saying that these are the ways people try to kind of rationalize or justify beauty, but I think it's more than that. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I obviously I don't agree. Like when, you know, they do that, they kind of, in a way, the proportion, the system of proportion, the proportion of beauty.
It's important that you ask this question because a lot of students sometimes ask me to like give grades and mark a building and say, you know, it's like looking at two mates and say who is prettier, you know.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
look at two girls and say who is prettier, and then you look at two buildings. You say which building is supposed to win the award.
Subjective.
Win the award for what? For good looks, right? Or what? For like it costs 30 cents cheaper than the other one. So how do you do that? So that's why the question of like what is beauty is very important for architects, because when you look at two projects and two buildings, what is it that you're trying to assess here? You say, oh, my building is more beautiful than yours, more beautiful. I mean, do I start to measure the amount of concrete you use, or how you bend the rebar? When you bend the rebar, it's a little bit more accurate than the rebar. Where do I start? Do I look at your foundation design, your termite treatment? I start from there, right? Your termite treatment. What product do you buy? Is it a German quality, Italian? Where do you get your termite treatment from? Beautiful. Where is beautiful? Where you draw the line? Where do you stop saying? After that line, it doesn't count anymore. It's no longer about beauty. So to me, you're right. There is no point in asking the question. Actually, there's no point in asking the question even to me, because you can't draw a line and say she's taller and I'm shorter and you're fatter and you're bigger. Like you say, the virtuous man is just a complete waste of time. Actually, I wasted my 2 years just reading up on that guy. It's a complete waste of my time, and a lot of people's time, I think.
And students, anybody you wanna add on, or we shall open up?